Oh, you ready? All right. Welcome. It's Monday, January 9th at 6 p.m. This is the Safety and Health Committee. Myself is chair, and to my right is Mr. Whitten, to my left is Mrs. Marshall, and we're here to have a discussion on some information related to urban beekeeping in residential areas. So I would like to see if Tim could share a little bit of information about what we found, and then we can have the gentleman that's interested sort of give some information also.
Okay.
Since we're having a discussion.
So I was asked to research urban beekeeping and kind of see what area communities around us were doing, how they were handling it, and the memo that was provided in the packet. I think we surveyed 13 communities in the Miami Valley. We try to pick communities that were similar size, similar location, so it's pretty much narrow to the central and southwest Ohio. With these items, what we found was most communities do not have ordinances, particularly for urban beekeeping. A lot of them allow them like we currently do in the agricultural and agricultural residential areas of our community. We looked, doing some research, watching documentaries, doing research on our own, talking to other communities, things we found. We try to provide information such as pros and cons, allowing them in the areas. Pros were like their benefit to the ecosystem, pollination, things of that nature, population, and of course honey that they produce. And the negatives, we talked about stings, swarming, colonization, pollination, and second hiving. So that's pretty much what the memo covered. Some of the items that we did find, I think Vandalia and maybe Tip City are becoming, I forget the term, it's like bee-friendly communities. Bee City, thank you. Bee City, USA. And some of the items that we recommended in there, should council decide to expand upon allowing urban beekeeping in other residential areas, we asked some of the items that they should look into, such as limitation of hives and apiaries, locating them in certain districts, and just certain things of that nature. One of the items we wanted to avoid would be maybe a negative impact on surrounding properties. I know swarming was an issue which was addressed in the memo, and as well as having like a water source located nearby to prevent the swarming and the bee flights. They asked for fencing and things of that nature. So that's really what the memo covered, and I'll be happy to answer any of the questions you may have.
Do you guys, let's have, is it Gene Bailey? And crew, if you want to come up and share a little bit about your interest, and then we can have some questions from there. If you'll state your name and address so that she can document that.
Yep, Gene Bailey, 973 Maple Crest Drive. Mr. Whitten is my ward representative, and so I want to thank him for helping walk me through this process and bringing us here today. So the idea of urban beekeeping is not new to this, or a new concept. It's being done all over the state of Ohio right now in many communities, large and small. Cleveland, Columbus, more locally Springfield, Kettering, and Vandalia are just a few examples. Vandalia was designated as Ohio's first Bee City, USA. So I personally made some phone calls to the Springfield and Vandalia city manager's office and spoke to someone in that office and just asked questions about their ordinance and success or failure or, information. And they couldn't tell me how many beekeepers they had in each city, but they knew they had them, but they had not experienced any complaints or issues or problems that they could tell me about. Honeybees, they're raised to be docile. Swarming and those kind of things can be managed by the beekeeper. Of course, everyone knows they're beneficial to the ecosystem. They're beneficial to backyard gardeners, your vegetable gardens, your flower gardens. And as the city continues to grow and encroach into the country, I think we have no choice but to help the honeybee population to recover and to grow and to be sustained. And this would be a really good way to do it within the city limits. And we can do it safely. with reasonable regulations, it will work in Troy, Ohio. So I'm just asked the council and the committee and the council, you know, to move this to a point where we can pass this in the city of Troy to allow urban beekeeping. I've talked to my neighbors that would be directly closest to if I were to have a hive in my backyard, and neither one of them had a problem with me having a beehive in my backyard. And some of the suggested regulations from the memo are very reasonable and a good way to manage this safely. So that's kind of
Would
where I'm
anybody
at.
else on the bee want to speak? I'll give them an opportunity also.
Thank you. Good job.
There.
Yes.
Okay.
He was really well spoken.
Can you state your name and address just so she can document?
Chelsea Snyder, and my address is 1559 Dayton Avenue, Columbus, Ohio, 43212. So I don't live here, but I'm from here. And I've been working with beekeepers as part of the Ohio Queen Bee Improvement Project, and we're studying honeybee genetics all around the state, collecting DNA samples and working with Purdue University. Also working with the beekeeper at Wright-Patt Air Force Base. They're really on board. We've got like 17 swarm traps out there. Just really want to reiterate all the points that my dad just made and how a lot of other communities do it just fine, no problems. It would be really cool if Troy could be a part of this. It could make us an even better hometown. And I know that I have a lot of people here also that are in support of it. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kim Lee, and I live at 2490 Meadow Point Drive. My husband and I are relatively new to Troy. We only moved here a few years ago from 12 acres, and I am an avid gardener. Produce, I can much of my produce. Troy has beautiful soil. I mean, some of the most beautiful soil we've seen, from clay. We can grow anything. I have to hand pollinate my produce. That concerns me a lot. It's not that I don't mind doing it. I certainly can use the exercise. It's the fact that I have to do it, which means that we are negatively affecting our environment. I only had half an hour at lunch. I printed out some very quick statistics. If you have bees in an urban environment, urban bees have a winter survival rate in an urban environment of 62.5% compared to just 40% in a rural area. We develop economically that we have an impact on the bees' health and by extension the agricultural community. The reason being is because we have healthier, more productive bees because we give them a wider range of a biodiversity. Not only do we give them flowers, a wide range of flowers, but also produce plants. It's been proven that we have healthier bees in an urban environment, and we do not have the pesticides that the agricultural department uses, which means that we don't have the colony collapse disorder. We are protecting the bees. So, like I said, I only did this like within half an hour today of lunch, and I did a Google search, and I have very easy flip-through reading. If I may present that.
You can give it to Sue, and she can pass it, give it to council.
Just through it as you go and see the positivity aspect of these.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Beth Kerber. I live at 820 Barnhart Road.
Okay.
I've been a beekeeper for about 5 years now, and one of the problems we do come into, she mentioned, is in rural areas they spray pesticides on the crops. It's very hard to keep your bees healthy and fight with farmers to not spray. So being able to bring them downtown and use the resources down here is an education for our younger generation. I have quite a few kids myself, and all their friends are interested in it, and there's nowhere to go for them to learn about beekeeping if they don't know someone out in the country. So, also being involved with the Bee City USA is a promotional opportunity for the city of Troy. It's one more thing that we can use to plug our great city. So, and also, if one of the concerns is swarm season is only about 4 weeks out of the year, and I'm on a list. If you give a beekeeper a call and say there's a swarm of bees, they will elbow each other in the throat to go get them. So it's really not a problem. Free bees are worth getting, and I've gotten 15 to 20 every year, so it's not really a problem if you have a phone list. It's pretty easily managed. And as far as bee stings, they're out there anyway. So really, you can train your bees to go toward different food sources or different water sources. It's not as hard as it's been made out to be. So consider that, and if you have any fear of bees, I just recommend educating yourself.
Ms. Gerber, can you talk about how since you are a beekeeper, how do you identify what is a swarm versus an aggressive hive? I mean, how do you make that distinction between?
They'll let you know right away. If it's a swarm, it's like the size of a basketball, usually hanging from a tree or on the back of a car, and you basically go out there with an empty box and sit it beside the swarm, and you take a old frame of honeycomb, and they will march into the box, and you just tape it up and go home. So they're not aggressive. If you see a cloud of bees and they're swarming, they have nothing to protect. So unless you go out there swinging and swatting, you won't get stung. They really are just trying to do what they do. They're either sourcing food or trying to find a home. So if you leave them alone, they'll do what they do. They'll cluster. One of us will come get them, and everybody will be happy at the end of the day. An assertive or an aggressive hive usually is kept by the beekeeper. If you have an aggressive hive, you usually remove that queen and replace it with the docile queen, and your problem is solved. So it's genetics, and they're looking into the different genetic breeds and breeding out problems every day. So if it is a problem, the beekeeper knows it because that's the first one that'll learn the lesson.
Would that maybe be a result of trying to, if someone was getting new into beekeeping, maybe getting a queen that wasn't local so they don't know who it is, or, I mean, how would you make sure you keep aggressive bees away from?
By educating yourself on what's out there, one of the problems you have is if you want to become a new beekeeper, finding bees is a problem. So a lot of people will order them from, usually Georgia. They order them from the south. When those bees come up, you really don't know what queen you're getting, but that queen is not acclimated to Ohio weather. So any good beekeeper has a northern queen raiser who will get them a queen, and they'll replace that queen anyway. So those bees that come up from Georgia, if you replace that queen, you will get one that's more acclimated to our weather and better personality traits, better grooming traits. They just have the genes for Ohio weather. And we have a network of people who can put those people in connection with people who raise their own queens.
Thank you.
Yeah. But it's really not unmanageable at all.
Is there a national registry for beekeepers that people could look up in their area, that there's another beekeepers in the area, or is it just?
Most places have a beekeeping association in their area, and we have a couple different ones that you can go to. I always recommend you go just for the education, and I always jokingly say bee people are the weirdest people you've ever met. But it's entertaining.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's a network, like I said, if you know, some of them are more into the genetic side, some of them are more into the social side, but you get to know beekeepers when you have bees. You just talking amongst yourselves, the numbers are passed around. If you have questions, you've got people you can talk to. And one of the problems is my daughters have friends in their school that would like to learn more about it, but there's no one in town. And these girls don't have a ride to get to the country. They're limited to what they could do, but they're very interested in it. And we're missing an opportunity to teach these people.
Right. Did you have a question, Mr. Phillips?
I'm just going to suggest, I don't know who the expert is out here. I'm somewhat supportive of the idea, but education from the start, I literally, from the birth of a bee forward, and lifespan, I mean, all the little intricacies, just for the record, would be very helpful, I think, informative. So I don't know who your expert person is, if it's you or whatever.
I'm not an expert, but I would love to talk to you about it. Like I said, beekeepers would love to share what they know because they're fascinating little creatures. And I would be more than happy to grab a cup of coffee with anybody here, tell you what I know, put you
You got the microphone.
in contact with whoever has questions.
I mean, the chairman is the director of this play, but, you know,
Wow, the power. I wish I'm interested in the Northern Queen. I can just get rid of my queen and get another queen. Never mind, that's another story.
That's where you get stung.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be beneficial, just maybe a synopsis of, like, how many bees are in a hive, how long do they last, do you have to change them out, is there interference to neighbors, because there's bees in the yard besides bees flying around, but is there, like...
There can be up to 80,000 bees in a
One
full
hive.
hive, and usually they will split, and that's when you get a swarm. But that's the first warm weekend in the season, and they know exactly what they're doing. They've already replaced their queen. They're going out to find another location, and that's when we get phone calls for the swarms.
And how long does a bee live?
In the winter, they live months in the winter, but in the summer, they usually wear themselves out in 4 weeks. Because they go from birth, they have a job when they're born, they take a different job at a week or so old, and then eventually they go to where they're out collecting food, and that's when they wear their wings out. And when they are in the country and carrying back those pesticides, that's when the toxins can go in and kill the eggs and ruin a hive. So that's one of the things that we fight against constantly, is trying to keep them healthy enough. And
are you replacing the bees then?
no.
Or just they...
that's the queen's job.
Yeah, the queen
queen's
can
job
lay
is
up to like
replace-
2,000 eggs a day.
Okay. Yeah, like...
But she doesn't do that year-round. So at a certain point, she'll start phasing it down for winter, and the cluster gets smaller so they can maintain a certain temperature, and they know how much food they have, and they adjust to that
So it's
size
a self-contained
Very much so.
community.
It's
bee
considered
community.
a super organism,
Okay.
and the way it reproduces is by swarming. So, but yeah, it's really fascinating.
Okay.
Do we have a lot of others like yourself in, like, the local country?
We do, and we have a lot more interest, especially in town, but they're not allowed. And what
Oh, right, I mean, I know that you live, like, outside the city limits, like, I'm just curious, like, how many other people...
I know a lot of people who are interested in it, but they...
But not actually have it like you do.
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the problems is they don't have the permission to do it. And one of the frustrating things is if you talk to the mayor or someone one-on-one, they'll say, just do it and be quiet about it. And that's frustrating because I can't. I'm married to the law director. So, I know.
That dang guy.
So I think...
Northern King you can get.
I think if you had an application fee or an application and you limited to how many hives could be kept on a property, it would be one way to start it off. You always recommend 2 hives because you can always use one to strengthen another. So you could limit it to 1 or 2 hives per property. If people would get their neighbor's permission, that's great, but not really necessary. If you're a responsible beekeeper, you're providing them with fresh water, so they're not in the neighbor's pool. So there's just, I guess, some etiquette to it,
Yeah.
but I don't know, I think it definitely should be changed from a hard no.
Okay. It wouldn't, I appreciate comments. I'm gonna does anybody else want to speak on the bees?
Well, look, I'm
Oh.
about that-
Would you like to ask her another question?
Please.
Okay.
Sorry.
It escaped me a bit, but with the rules, I'm assuming you've read the report out?
No.
No, okay. Then my question is moot for you.
I know that there was some recommendations.
Right, yes. Are you aware of what they are?
I haven't read them, but I just think you should allow us to do it with a certain, with some guidelines and some trust in both directions. And if you require everyone to be registered with the state, then they are also registered with the county, and the county bee inspector can come out, and he can also provide some of that education and some of the checks and help people. He came up to my hives this year and said, these 4 need to be moved over to where you have the other ones because it's too wet here. So those are the little pointers that I don't know that, but learning from him, I trust.
So there is a requirement in the county that you be registered?
I don't know required. I think it's a state registration. Yeah, it's $5 to register your apiary regardless of how many bees you have.
With the state?
With the state. They notify the county.
Okay.
But I've also talked to the county, and they're willing to put on educational classes to help educate people who want to know.
So is there a local association of, just the beekeepers themselves?
Yes, Miami Valley Beekeepers Association. And I think there's another one,
West Central.
West Central.
Okay, gotcha.
They meet on a night I work, so I haven't been to that one yet.
All right, thank you.
Okay?
All right. Anybody else?
Kelly Snyder, 935 Atlantic Street, Troy. I'm here representing the Miami County Local Food Council, and we are the organization that runs the Cherry Street Local Farmers Market, and we are definitely on board with having urban beekeeping. It is a struggle every year to get honey vendors at the market. It's always something that we're looking for, and it's also something the customers are always looking for. There's a lot of studies been done for like allergies and things. If you take honey, local honey, it helps allergies and things like that. So it is something that we are always looking for to have a vendor at our market. So we would love to see more vendors that would be available to come, even small vendors. If they came once or twice during the season, it would help us fill that gap that we need. And as far as some education, OSU Extension is a phenomenal resource that we have. And Tim, I don't know if you talk to OSU Extension at all, but Amanda Bennett is a beekeeper, and she's in the Extension. She's one of our Extension agents. So I'd really highly recommend talking to them. They will do education pieces as well. So I think that is something that if they haven't been informed of this, they probably should be in on the conversation because they're a very good resource. So I just wanted to say that the Food Council as a whole would be in favor of urban beekeeping.
Hi, Kendall Kerber, 820 Barnhart Road. I'm here to say that, I'm 14, I'm not very old, but a lot of people my age don't have the experience to learn more about bees because people don't really like to talk about it, because people find it scary because they don't know. And I think people need to, be able to learn about it because it impacts our lives so much on the daily and they don't know it. And I think it's really important for younger people like me to get into this earlier, and being able to have bees in the city helps because people can't just go out to a country because a lot of people can't have bees. And I think it's really important for people to learn about this kind of stuff.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having courage to stand up. 14, that's good.
I know.
My name's Tim Ray. I reside at 619 Orchard Drive in Troy. I've been a hobby beekeeper for 5 or 6 years. I would like to comment on Beth Kerber's a couple of her items. I know she's the wife of the law director, but I've never known her to be quiet. I'm also on the sworn list.
You're not the only one.
I'm also on the sworn list, as she is, and I know what she means about striking somebody in the throat when you're after a sworn. Thank you. I have put together a little packet. I did read the survey. I enjoyed the points of the survey. I made some comments that I would like to submit to council. Along with those comments are some things related to the state registration of apiaries, the fact that the county does have a county-appointed, each county has a bee inspector that the county appoints, but that's under the Ohio Department of Agriculture's regulation that apiaries be registered. So we have one here in Troy every year. I have the list of the one who was here in 2022. I don't know who's going to be in 2023. Someone asked earlier about the number of apiaries registered in Troy that were inspected last year. That was 142. That doesn't mean he inspected all of them. The inspections are normally unannounced, but if there's a problem with an apiary that he's visited, then he will contact that person. So.
Did you say 142 you inspected in Troy or the county?
No, in the county. Yeah. So, if I could, I'll leave this. There's also some links in here to Bee City USA as well as the State Apiary, and I am a member of the Miami County Beekeepers Association, and I would encourage that if council moves forward with some type of ordinance, that they at least incorporate someone from the Beekeepers Association to help have input on that ordinance, to make it perhaps more applicable to urban beekeeping.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, I'm absolutely an expert on everything.
So, is this a particular honey that we have here, is it a combination of everything?
That particularly is your honey.
Well, I mean, that means a particular...
No, that honey is from my hive, which are currently out on Eldine Road, so it's fairly local honey, and it's from the summer. I collected that in July of this year, so
thank you.
Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I know you said you're pat around some of your thoughts on the regulations that were mentioned in the summary there, but just for those of you who don't have that or didn't see that, I thought now might be a good time to bring some of those up. Some of the requirements were limiting it to square footage, making sure there's water on site, a flyway, which is, as I understand, a barrier for the bees to basically gain altitude so they don't fly horizontally. Registering with the Ohio Apiaries, or registering with the Ohio Department of Agriculture via Section Chapter 909. One frame per, basically the square footage would limit your number of hives you could have there, having removable frames, and basically being watchful for aggressive behavior and removing those as quickly as possible. Are those all standard beekeeper language or procedures that don't strike you as out of the ordinary? I know you might have some thoughts here and there, but...
One of the things that I would want to have discussion on would be square footage of the lot. 20,000 square feet, I think would eliminate a beekeeping possibility for a huge percentage of the homeowners in Troy within the city limits. A honeybee has no idea what the square footage of a lot is. I think maybe a more practical way to approach it would go with some type of radius, like 100 or 200 foot radius, whereby a prospective beekeeper would have to check with all the neighbors within that radius to see if there's, one, any objection, and two, anybody that has an allergy to a bee sting. So that might be one thing that I would suggest. Most hobby beekeepers generally end up having 2 hives. That can happen if the first hive, which a beekeeper should do, split, like Beth Kerber talked about. When you split a hive, you're basically starting another hive, so you've preempted the swarming of that hive because you've done it manually. So that second hive then becomes that person's second hive. And sometimes they're given away, sometimes they're sold. There's a limit to what a hobbyist beekeeper wants to be involved with as far as number of hives. The flight path is an issue. The orientation of the hive doesn't have to be at a certain spot on a lot, and it doesn't have to be a certain direction. But the flight path, it takes a few feet for a bee to get out and up. So a lot of times there is a fence or a shrub or something 8 to 10 feet in front of the hive that will, kind of direct the hive or the honeybee up and away. And they're fascinating to watch because once they get up and away and that first forager has found a good source of nectar or pollen, then you'll see them coming and going all day long. It's really fascinating, or fascinating insects.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
These things are saleable, the hives themselves. I mean, if you had a beekeeper that had reached his limit or whatever, or wanted to get rid of his hives altogether, they are very saleable.
Very saleable. Just contact another beekeeper. As someone mentioned this, the winter survival rate, a lot of times at best is 50% for various reasons. So if you don't catch a swarm, and if you don't have a hive to split, then it's going to be at least $150 out of pocket to get a new small colony out of Georgia or someplace else. And this will be a very small 10,000 bees and a queen. So that's a rough start in the spring.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And any other bee enthusiast?
Hello, my name is Joe Arnst. I live at 1448 Skylark Drive. I've had bees for, first of all, not at my property. I've maintained a couple of hives at my parents' house down in Vandalia. The reason that I got into beekeeping is there was a lady from the Food Council that barely touched on it, and she said that people will buy local honey for their allergies. The only reason that I got into beekeeping is to help my allergies. I take 1 tablespoon of honey every morning, and I don't have to take any allergy medicine now. It would be very beneficial to be able to have my honey from closer to where I live. And to touch on the square footage requirement, the 20,000 square foot requirement would put me under, and I would still not be able to have my bees. Honeybees, and I'm certainly no expert, honeybees can fly up to 1.5 miles away from their hive to go collect pollen and everything that they need. And so when I look out in my yard now, I see honeybees. There's wild hives different places already. So it is beneficial to have them in our city, and they're already here. So let's do it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Any other bee enthusiast? Any questions from council? Yes, from other councils sitting in the stands.
Thank you for calling on me, I appreciate that.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes. 591 Chartwell Court, Troy, Ohio. And after listening to everything, I think this would be a honey of an idea for the city of Troy. Thank you very much.
Start that on the record.
Yeah. think you've been hanging around Todd Sievert too much on your jokes. All right, did you like to say one more thing, then we'll close?
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch, since the topic of square footage was brought up, I did print off a couple examples here from the Dayton city ordinance and the Vandalia ordinance on beekeeping, if I could just submit that.
Yeah.
I highlighted the differences, and basically, Dayton allows a maximum of 2 hives on 3,000 to 7,000 square feet lot. That's much smaller than the 20,000 recommendation that was made by the city. In Vandalia, same thing, it allows 2 hives up to 21,000 square feet. They allow 4 hives between 21,000 and 32,000. So if I could just submit that as a, might be a good framework to work on.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Mr. Bailiff, if I may, since you started this process, how many folks have you spoken to about this issue?
The handful most of the handful that have spoken here today.
And have you found anybody that is negative towards the ordinance or anything?
I have not. And I've spoken to like I said before, my neighbors adjacent to my property. I kind of give them just a quick rundown of what I was trying to do here, and they didn't have any problem with it.
And with I think you mentioned earlier that with the criteria that the staff report has, that there's nothing negative in there, except maybe some tweaks on square footage or a tiny other thing, but what would those tweaks be?
So the square footage would definitely be a big tweak, because, like the other gentleman said, 20,000 square feet would eliminate me, actually, from even being able to have a hive. However, I would say, if that's what we need to start with as a framework to trial run this, then I'm okay with that, and we can reevaluate in the future, maybe shrinking down the square footage size. The only other comment I would make would be concerning where the bees come from. So I've been working with a master beekeeper. His name's Dwight Wells. He's from Tip City, and he's a big part of the research my daughter talked about, catching feral swarms from Ohio, locally. Buying bagged bees from places like Georgia and Texas and those places where you run into risk of getting aggressive bees, and of course they just can't survive the Ohio winter, so they're just not successful because they're not acclimated to this, weather pattern in wintertime. So I would not be opposed to making that a requirement, that it has to be locally sourced Ohio feral bees. I mean, there are beekeepers out there that they'll split their hives and they sell nooks. That's basically bees in a box with a queen that would be locally sourced.
Do you think that any of the potential beekeepers would be opposed to, say, and I'm just throwing out a number out of this air, a $5 or a $10 registration fee or a one-time fee or something with the city to register with us and that sort of thing?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I appreciate everyone sharing and participating in our discussions for bees. I do think we need to take it back to the city. I would like to see, and you guys can agree or not, but I'd like to see maybe the city working with the county bee inspector to see if there's like a limit that he might be able to handle. Like if we had 7,000 beehives, I don't know. But maybe speak with them, maybe include the Ohio State Extension, Amanda, and maybe some of the Miami Valley beekeepers to sort of talk about the regulations if we're going to do it. Like maybe just have a discussion with a group of people that are involved to just fine tune, okay, is it going to be 3,000, 7,000? I think we just got to work through a couple of those things. to sort of think long-term, cover it, and be able to not have to keep coming back every year to extend whatever. I'd like to look long-term and just do this once and say, yes, we're gonna do it, and it's gonna cover most everything. Not that we can't change it later, but it would cover most. I think that would be the best-case scenario. So we're gonna take it back to the city, and then we'll get those involved, to move this process and sort of, get a little fine-tune some of these, initial, regulations that we put on.
I agree.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Agree with that?
Mhm.
All right, so we'll send that back and give the city some more work. Anything else to come for the safety and health?
No, sir.
All right, this meeting is